What up, Buck Squad? I'm your host, Jaron. I'm going to tell you why signing Trey Hendrickson would be a major mistake.
I'm James Yarcho. I'm going to tell you why it was smart for the Bucs to not franchise tag Mike Evans.
And I'm Ryan Lavoie, and I'm going to tell you why the top couple of targets in free agency better be on the defensive side of the ball.
Hey, Tampa Bay, it's the Buccaneers squad. Everything Tampa Bay Buccaneers every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from the heart of the Sunshine State, the way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. With a touch of the Buccaneer way, the Buccaneer Squad Show starts now.
What up, Buck Squad? Like I said, I'm your host, Jaron. We got a packed show for you today. Trey Hendrickson, is he going to Tampa Bay? Well, Adam Schefter weighed in on that one. Then we'll dive into Mike Evans not being franchise tagged and what that can mean. Then we will give our free agent wish list, which is just our top 3 free agents we would like to see Tampa Bay sign. Before wrapping things up with a look around the NFL, there was a major trade today in the NFL. Chiefs made a big move. So we'll talk about a lot of stuff in that segment as well. But first, let's start with Trey Hendrickson. Adam Schefter, I believe it was when he went on the Pardon My Take podcast, but he basically said that Trey Hendrickson would love to play for Tampa Bay, and that would be, and it all depended on if Tampa also wanted him, because he lives in Florida and he would just love to just stay in Florida, and then he loves, defense that top balls runs and things like that. And my first thought when it comes to that is no. And it's just simply that, because first off, I love Trey Hendrickson as a player. Don't get me wrong. I think he is a very, very, very good player, and a lot of teams would be happy to have him. But with that being said, he's starting to age up there a little bit. I think he'll be going into year 32, his 32 age season, not year 32. But and he has already, he just played 7 games last year due to an injury, had 4 sacks, which was his worst season since his second season when he played for the Saints. And he's going to want big money. Obviously, if you can get him for a home discount like that, then maybe you can make that work, but I doubt that. He's going to be a guy that's going to want probably a 3-4, maybe even maybe not 5, but 3-4 year deal is what he's going to want, with a lot of money. And at that point, you're paying a guy that's going to be 32 this year, 33, 34, and then maybe 35 at defensive end, a lot of money. And that's kind of what happened to you already, because you paid a lot of guys, and rightfully so. You won the Super Bowl, so you wanted to keep everyone, so you paid a lot of guys. But that's why your defense got really old, and that's why you're now in the rebuild that you're in. And so again, if you can get him for a cheap deal, or maybe you spend a lot of money on him for 1 year or a 2-year type deal, then maybe I'm more on board with that. But if he gets what he's wanting from other teams, which I think he'll get that from a team, it just hopefully isn't Tampa, then I don't think the risk is worth the reward.
Here's where I'm going to slightly disagree with you.
Okay.
We don't know what Trey Hendrickson actually wants in terms of compensation. We have speculation. We have, kind of the market value, but we don't know what Trey is really looking for. Now, if this is a situation where it's kind of like Mike Evans, where he may not go to the highest bidder, he may be looking for the better situation, the chance to compete, things like that. Tampa could be a really, really good fit here for him. And the big thing that I'm taking away from all of this is Schefter's not throwing this out here if he doesn't know something. Now, this was all slanted towards Hendrickson. He wasn't saying the Bucs are going to heavily pursue him. He's saying Trey Hendrickson wants to play for the Bucs. Mm-hmm. So that's a message that either Trey Hendrickson or his agent is sending to Adam Schefter, saying, maybe we haven't heard that the Bucs are interested here, and maybe we can be priced where they are willing to pay. You can have it incentive laden. We keep hearing, $25+ million a year for Hendrickson. Maybe he's willing to take 19 or 20, but then you can have bonus incentives for 10 sacks, 15 sacks, snaps, how far you get into the playoffs. You can make this work. And on top of all that, if he's saying he wants to stay in Florida, I realize that it's not going to completely make up for taking less to go to Tampa, but playing half of your games with no state tax is going to help supplement some of the losses there. This is a guy that has spent a lot of time with the Cincinnati Bengals. Their defense has been terrible the last couple of years, and I know he had the injury last year, but the 2 years before that, full seasons, 17 and a half sacks each season. He was on pace for a double-digit sack season last year. So I think this kind of opens the door a little bit for the Bucs to be interested if the price is right, because it is still going to boil down to price. They're not going to go up to $25 million for Hendrickson, but you get that down to 19 to 21, now we're talking.
And it's very possible that he is willing to do that since, as you guys said, I mean, there's a clear interest, it seems, or else this information is not just coming out of nowhere. Adam Schefter, who has as many sources as possible in the league, is not going to poof that out of thin air. So, someone on that team, as James was referring to, has a high level of interest in Tampa. And here's my thing is, again, and we'll get to this more in the free agent wish list, Tampa has to do something on the defensive side of the ball in free agency / trading pre-draft. Like, they're going to get something of substance in the draft on the defensive side of the ball, but that can't be their only thing. If they think they're going to draft their way to all of the gains that they need to make on the defensive side in year one, that's just not practical. And if you're going to have a team that's still slanted as an older team, it doesn't make sense to be solely building your defense through the draft that way. So they're going to have to come up with something of substance on that defensive side of the ball. And of course, we've discussed the Max Crosby dynamic at length, and we've discussed that is going to be probably similar money when all is said and done, and it's going to be draft capital. So in a sense, if you're pairing the two together, Trey Hendrickson would be cheaper because you're not having to give up the draft capital side of it too. Now, again, Crosby would be viewed probably as the more premium player right now. Not that Hendrickson couldn't roll around next year and have a more productive year, because as James said, I saw some false equivalencies online, shocker, that are likening it to a Hassan Reddick situation. Like, oh, there's a bit of a gamble because Hassan Reddick was a gamble. Well, these are two different things. Trey Hendrickson's still very productive when healthy. The gamble is that he will play enough games to have that productivity to be worth the price. But Hassan Reddick, in the 10 games he played for the Jets in his last season, had less TFLs, less tackles, less sacks than Trey Hendrickson did in his 7 last season. So the point is Hendrickson, I think, when healthy, as James referred to, still a double-digit sack guy and should still be that way for at least a couple more seasons. So really what you're looking at is the Bucs have to think, do they need someone high impact like Crosby or Hendrickson? And if so, are you comfortable with the draft capital? Because again, that's always something that Jason Light cherishes more than the average GM. And if you're not comfortable with the draft capital part of it, and you do think you need a high-end player, well, Hendrickson's going to be the leader in the clubhouse at that point. So I'm not necessarily saying that I think that they must go get Hendrickson or that they must stay away, but I do think that it's one of the very viable options. That the Bucs are serious about making a big improvement pre-draft, and again, I think that's the only kind of improvement they need to be worried in making right now. If they're serious about that, then Hendrickson has to be one of the 2 or 3 guys on that list for you.
What Tampa Bay would have to ask themselves if they're comparing Crosby and Hendrickson is getting someone 3 years younger worth the draft capital? Because that's basically what it would be. Yes, it would be the same terms. You're probably paying them the same. But with Crosby, if you give up draft capital, but Hendrickson, you won't. Is it worth getting a guy that's 29 and instead of a guy that's 32? And 29, you're still kind of in your prime. Now by the end of your contract, you're starting to tail out of your prime as well. But whereas Hendrickson is kind of already at the tail end of his prime, and you could argue he's past it. But I think he still has some good years. I think he's going to go to a team and have some good years. And to y'all's point, Adam Schefter doesn't tweet this stuff out of thin air. Big reason why Adam Schefter has talked about it. He gets a lot of his information from agents. So this is absolutely talking to an agent and an agent that wants Trey Hendrickson in Tampa Bay. And I will say, James, I to your point, if it was one of those deals that you gave him, he was on a 1-year, $29 million deal with the Bengals this past year. If it was one of those like 2 years, 55 to 60 million type things, you throw on some incentives on top of that, I'd be fine with something like that. It's if and to your point, he hasn't necessarily said what he wants, but if he comes out and it's like, no, he wants 4 years, 120 million or whatever, like something like that. It all depends on how long it is. I can't do something for 3 or 4 years for a player like Hendrickson because of his age already.
Yeah, and I think if there is a third year in this deal, it's going to be an option year, whether that's a club option or a player option. It would wait to be determined. Now, Hendrickson, he'll be 32 in December, so he'll be turning 32 during the season. But here's the other thing, and I mentioned this on the main show. We talked a lot on the last squad show about maybe you're signing that older veteran guy like a Khalil Mack, a Jadeveon Clowney as kind of the bridge guy. The same could be applied to Trey Hendrickson, but you're going to get, if he's healthy, more production out of Hendrickson than you will a Mack or a Clowney or those guys. And you can still draft a edge rusher with your first or second round pick if it's an Akis or a Young or R. Mason Thomas, your guy, Jaron. Now you have a heavy hitting 3-man rotation there at edge rusher when you throw in Yaya Diaby. But back to where I was going. If you remove the sentimental and emotional attachment, we're talking about a 33-year-old wide receiver coming off of an injured season, getting $20+ million a year to stay in a position group where if he doesn't return, that position group is still okay. Why would you not be willing, as a fan of the Buccaneers, to see them invest the same kind of money in a younger player at a bigger position of need? And that's where I think things get skewed a little bit, because if they announce over the weekend that Mike Evans has agreed to a 2-year, $55 million deal with the Buccaneers to return, everybody's elated. But then you're going to have people that throw a fit if Mike Evans walks out the door, but you sign Trey Hendrickson to a 2-year, $55 million deal when you need Hendrickson's production more than you actually need Mike Evans, because that receiver room is still stacked.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to see what they do in the coming weeks with, again, these restructures, because that's really the key to how much business they're looking to do in free agency. Right now, I mean, there's several different estimates out there, but there's somewhere in the low teens in salary cap space, 10 to 15 million, I think, depending on where you look. I think Spotrack's got it like 11.3 right now. Well, they can clear up about 50 million of space with 3 restructures with Tristan Wirfs, Antoine Winfield Jr., and Luke Gedeke. The Gedeke one has to happen first because of a roster bonus that gets converted to a signing bonus in March, late March. So the deal there is, if you're looking into trying to get 2 type of Mike Evans contracts in, and again, you use the 2 for 55, or there's 2 for 50, whatever it is, $20 to $25 million a year players. Well, they need to restructure 2, if not 3 major deals to come up with that. So if there's Mike Evans and something else of substance, they've got work to do on that front. Of course, there's other restructures they can do, but those are just the simplest and biggest. So I think that ultimately, if they do something with Gedeke's deal here in the next couple of weeks, that could be an indicator that they're at least interested in pairing together 2 big contracts. If they don't, we're probably only talking about 1 big contract, and then they'll do the restructure with Wirfs or Winfield when that is needed to be done. So I think the cap math could give us an initial clue on if they're going to swing twice or just be swinging once for a big time player.
And like you mentioned, they can restructure a lot of contracts. Teams do it all the time. We just saw Dallas do that and opened up like 40 million or something in cap today. I think that was earlier today, or it was yesterday. I think it was today. So that stuff happens all the time. And I do want to be clear, like, if Hendrickson does sign with Tampa, I'm not going to be upset, because this is the thing. I can't on one hand be like, hey, Tampa, you got to start making moves to be better on defense, and then them do it and then criticize it, because that's very hypocritical to do that. I just think if he does sign a big, like a multi-year contract, that it would be a mistake. But again, I would at least credit them for trying something to fix the defense, because again, I can't keep saying they have to do something and then get mad when they do something, which fans do that all the time.
And real quick, Jaron, Greg Allman tweeted out a couple of days ago, 3 easiest moves for the Bucs to create 2026 cap space or simple restructures. Doing so with Tristan Wirfs could create $19.8 million in new space, plus Antoine Winfield would be $13.6 million. Gedeke, $16.3 million. You do all 3, that's just under $50 million in cap space that you can create very quickly. So, Ryan, to your point, it will be easy, and it's something that we see Jason Light and Mike Greenberg do year after year after year. I expect that to be happening sooner than later.
Yeah, for sure. All right, coming up next, Mike Evans was not franchise tagged. What does that mean about its future in Tampa? Let's talk about it. Well, this episode is sponsored by Betterhelp. March is a time to celebrate women, especially around International Women's Day, and to recognize just how much they carry at work, in relationships and families, and in all the unseen roles they step into every single day. It's easy to celebrate that strength, but it's just as important to make space for their emotional well-being, and honestly, that goes for all of us. I want to highlight my wife. She's a fantastic woman. We got married back in July, and already our short marriage, we've had some ups, we've had some downs, and she's been my rock. She's been the person I can lean on through all of it. When bad things have happened, I always thought, man, she's going to worry, she's going to freak out. And no, she was very supportive, very helpful. That eased my anxiety, that eased any worry that I had. And so, she's just all around amazing. And I'm incredibly happy to be married to her for sure. So your emotional well-being matters. Find support and feel lighter in therapy. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's betterhelp.com/lockedon. All right, Bucs Squad, back for another segment of the Bucs Squad Show. Reminder, this is just extra content we do twice a week on Mondays and Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Doesn't take anything away from what the great work that James does, so make sure you follow him throughout the week. I'm really upset my wife wasn't here to hear that great message I just made for her, but all right. Maybe she'll go back and watch it. But all right, so let's dive into Mike Evans. He was not franchise tagged at the deadline. I believe that was on Tuesday. It's not a surprise. I mean, Jason Light talked about it at the combine. Essentially, they didn't want to do that because they felt like they owed him the opportunity to explore all options. And we've talked about that many times, where they need to do what's best for Mike. And if Mike wants to explore many options, let Mike explore many options. Now, a report from his agent came out today that said that the talks went really well with Tampa Bay. Zach Robinson's even reached out about what the scheme fit would be like. Said that Mike loves Tampa Bay, will always love Tampa Bay. So all the stuff that we kind of figured. So as far as not getting the franchise tag, I do not feel like that means he's not going to come back to Tampa, but it's one of those things. And I know, Ryan, we talked about it before this, that he kind of also listed his 4 criteria. So I'll let you guys go through that as well. But it's one of those things that the more and more you hear about Mike and he wanting to look around and wants to see what's out there, it does feel like he's going to end up going somewhere else. And as you mentioned, James, if it comes down to, do you pay Mike 2 years, $55 million, or you pay Trey Hendrickson 2 years, $55 million? It sucks because Mike's a legend, but you do pay Trey Hendrickson in that scenario.
Yeah, it's a matter of, you have to make the tough decisions, right? You have to set up the franchise for not just success in 2026, but also set them up beyond. And the comparison that I've used a ton on the regular show is Julian Breezeball, the general manager of the Tampa Bay Lightning. He got a rash of grief from Lightning fans when he let Steven Stamkos walk out the door. He's the greatest player in franchise history. He lets him go. He signs Jake Gensel. Lightning fans are not complaining now. Nobody is complaining because we have seen the decline of Steven Stamkos as a 5-on-5 player, and Jake Gensel is one of the best players on the team and a gold medalist now, being part of Team USA. The reason it's good that the Bucs did not franchise tag Mike, as I alluded to at the open of the show, is, number one, you're just going to make him mad. And I realize a lot of times the franchise tag is used as a extended negotiating tool. But when somebody like Mike has made it clear that he wants to test out this process, and he wants to see what else could be out there, you are just going to make him mad. And you're going to guarantee that he leaves the next year. At this stage, you still have a shot to bring him back and that he will only play for the Buccaneers. You franchise tag him, he is gone next year. Not only that, you're overpaying him if you franchise tag him. The franchise tag for wide receivers is about $27.3 million for 1 year. And remember, that is fully guaranteed. You cannot prorate that. You cannot use void years in that. You are spending $27.3 million for 1 season of Mike Evans. If he signs a 2-year deal or a 3-year deal with the Bucs, he's not getting $27 million a year. He's getting closer to 20, which is what his contract was like last year. So it's a double whammy if you end up using this to secure him, because it's you're spending money you don't need to spend, and you're going to have a very unhappy player in your locker room.
And look, the franchise tag in general, not every time, usually used with someone a little bit younger than Mike, because you're usually talking about the transition from a guy either from their rookie contract to their first big time contract or somewhere in the middle of their career. Usually because of that reason you just said, James, usually guys on the back half like this, you are overpaying them to franchise tag them. So that's why, this shouldn't be too big of a surprise for anyone that they did not do this, despite Mike being obviously the most coveted free agent in this cycle. So I think the deal here is, when we evaluate what the agent said and what the reporting from Jeremy Fowler is, Mike, according to Fowler, there's 4 things Mike's looking at: quarterback he believes in, a chance at a Super Bowl, a top shelf offensive coordinator, and a promise of a bunch of touches. Now, if you're kind of looking at how the Bucs stack up and all that, well, that's why they need to have the meeting with him and Zach Robinson, because he obviously is not familiar enough. I mean, Zach has worked in the division for the last couple of seasons, but you still want to hear from Zach Robinson, because of the last 2 parts of that. Does Mike Evans view Zach Robinson as a high level OC? And based off of that, what is his opportunity for touches? Does Zach Robinson think that Mike Evans is still far and away the number 1 option on this team? And if he doesn't, what does that mean? And if he does, what types of routes am I running? What's the snap count rate? That sort of thing. So that meeting was to clear up those 2 things. Now, the quarterback he believes in, I'd be shocked if Mike Evans does not believe in Baker Mayfield. Baker is someone that was a part of this 1,000-yard season journey the past couple of seasons before this year. He is somebody that I think has a great bunch of leadership qualities. We talk about how much he can be endearing as just a football dude, not a guy that's scared to get touched and welcomes whatever challenge is necessary. So I think that he's an easy guy to play for. So I'd be shocked that Baker does not.
And Mike's raved about Baker.
Sure. Yeah.
Every time. So, yeah.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So that box is checked. So now it comes down to the old elephant in the room, something we debate on this show from time to time. What are the chances at a Super Bowl in Tampa Bay? Well, a lot of that has to do with how much better you make your defense better. I think that you've already missed an opportunity, quite frankly. Again, we can bring it up from time to time. I would have changed head coaches. I think that was a thing that offensive guys would be probably more willing to do than the defensive guys, from what we've heard with some of the leadership. And I think that Mike is going to think about, did we actually change enough to where I'm not having to scream down the tunnel about the lead we just blew on Thursday Night Football that's now putting us in peril? Because that is the most visibly frustrated, other than Mike trying to punch Marshawn Lattimore and vice versa, that's the most visibly pissed off we've ever seen Mike Evans. And so I think that those memories and thinking about how they have operated with their coaching staff and what they think they need to do in free agency. What are they telling Mike Evans is their offseason plan? Because there's very few players that get to know that, but Mike Evans would be one that would get to know a little bit of what the Bucs plans are, in my opinion. So I think the Bucs clearly check a couple of those boxes, but what did he hear from Zach Robinson, and what did he hear maybe about the Bucs' future in terms of this offseason and the personnel they're looking to bring in?
Yeah, and we've talked about that many times, where we think this could be a long process for Mike, because he wants to see, what do the Bucs do in free agency? Do they go sign a Trey Hendrickson? Do they make a trade for Max Crosby? Do they sign some linebackers? Like, whatever the case may be, like, he's probably he wants to sit back and see what they do defensively, because I know he knows that the way the defense has played the last couple of years, not just this past year, is not good enough to win a Super Bowl. And that's why he might think his chances are better with a team like Buffalo, Kansas City, a team like that. Chargers, even another team. So yeah, I definitely think he wants to sit back and kind of look and see what's out there, while also keeping an eye on what Tampa does. And ultimately, it's one of those things that there's so many issues with Tampa defensively. I don't know if they can address all of them in this offseason. And that's something that I think Mike will at least think about, because it's probably his last year. Now, I think wherever he goes, he'll sign a 2-year deal and then decide if he plays the second year kind of thing. And maybe he does. Maybe he has a good year. He feels good, healthy, and all that, and plays another year. It's possible. But he's probably looking into it like, hey, this could be my last year. And if that's the case, Tampa might be 2 years or 3 years away before fixing all the issues defensively. And I just don't have that timeline. But as you mentioned, Ryan, Tampa checks almost every box. One of the positive ones for the Super Bowl thing is the NFC South, while they didn't win it this year, is still not a great conference. And that's at least a bargaining chip to get into the postseason. Then you see what happens at that point. But without improving the defense dramatically, I don't know if they sway into the Super Bowl contention category.
Yeah, and I think I might have mentioned it on the last show, but I think Monday is going to be really telling. When the negotiating window opens at noon, if we immediately hear that Mike Evans has spoken with the Patriots, who just got rid of Stephon Diggs and have over $50 million in cap space, if the Patriots and Derek Gilmore have had conversations, and the Bills and Derek Gilmore have had conversations, and it starts to reach that point, I think the Bucs are in trouble. However, if we're not hearing any of that, and Mike still hasn't done anything, and you get the news that the Bucs got Trey Hendrickson or whoever else, I know we're about to talk about the free agents, that's when you're sitting there going, okay, I think Mike is sitting back, he's seeing what they're doing, and then he's going to start figuring out his process. But the Bucs instantly become bigger contenders than they already are if those moves are being made.
I think that ultimately, look, we're still trying to come up with the entire list of we've been able to come up with teams that would make sense, but do those teams actually have the interest, right? Because as you said, James, it feels like with New England, who was very aggressive on the Chris Godwin free agency last year, it feels that they would want to replace their veteran wide receiver who, again, had a productive season. I don't know if everyone had him at 1,000 yards this year after the turmoil he's been in the last couple of years. So does New England view it as, we just need to replace that veteran receiver again? Mike is going to be that level of production. He's around the same timeline. We'll reassess after a year or two. Or are they more interested in trying their hands at drafting another wide receiver to try to figure out how to get Drake May a tandem that would work for years to come? I don't know where their strategy is going to be, but it would check the box. I mean, they just went to the Super Bowl. So obviously it checks that part of the box. And, I always continue to think about hammering the Houston Texans point home, hammering that home. That's where he's from. Again, they have a need there. But does he have questions about Stroud now? Because we all have questions about Stroud. After year one, it looked like it was going to go in an incredibly good direction for him. And now, after the turnover fest he's had, again, I'm not sure what that looks like in a year or two. And I think Mike would be very frustrated and mad at himself if he went to a situation that the quarterback ended up underwhelming and being a difference maker in the wrong direction. So again, I think the moral of the story is, again, we look at that checklist, and again, I think Tampa does check a lot of those boxes, but it always is going to come down to the other things going on. Like, it's not just a vacuum. Like, you sign Mike Evans or you don't, and your off season's that, and there's no other things in play. You're not worried about cap space. That goes for every other team. Of course, everyone not living in a vacuum is going to be checking in on these guys we're about to talk about. The Bucs are going to be trying to assess what kind of money they need to improve their linebacking room, their their defensive line to some degree. Are they going to make any moves in the secondary with corners? So there's other things here. As much as we talk about the one thing with the Mike Evans, and again, rightfully so. Ultimately, they are going to have to look at what that actual figure is, and with the Mike Evans camp, they're going to have to look at and say, do we want to be the group that played for one team our whole career, or do we think the grass is greener on the other side?
Yeah, no, those are all really good points. So we'll have to wait and see what Mike ends up deciding. A lot of free agency periods still to go once that kicks off. But all right, coming up next, we're going to reveal our free agent wish list. Don't go anywhere.
Hey, it's Matt Derry from the Locked On Lions podcast. The people I love depend on me. If I'm gone, the financial responsibilities don't disappear. I didn't want my family figuring things out during the hardest moment of their lives. That's why I knew only one place to go. I chose life insurance through my friends at Ethos. Ethos makes getting life insurance fast and easy, 100% online. You can get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and get same-day coverage. There's no medical exam. You just answer a few simple health questions. You can get up to $3 million in coverage. Some policies are as low as $30 a month. I love the folks at Ethos. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos now by going to ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. In as little as 10 minutes, you can get the free quote and up to $3 million in coverage at ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. That is ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Application times and rates may vary.
All right, Bucs Squad, we're back for another segment of the Bucs Squad show. On this one, we're going to talk about kind of our top 3 free agents that we want Tampa Bay to go after. And, you know, I almost changed my list a little bit because of the Sean Tucker news, because it kind of feels like that's setting up for Tyler Algier coming. So, but I'm not going to go there because I still think there's so many defensive moves that need to happen that I'm going to still stick with 3 defensive guys. And so my 3 top ones, I'm going to cheat a little bit because I have my number 1, and I'm not saying their number 1 is in top priority. I'm not really ranking them, but Nakobe Dean or Devin Bush. I kind of do a hyphen there just because, like, I think either one would be perfect for Tampa. I just wonder with Dallas hiring Christian Parker and they don't have a linebacker either, that maybe they want a guy that he will know his system to come in, and maybe I think Dallas might be the front runner there. And so if that's the case, I think Devin Bush would be a great next option kind of thing. And, you know, and I will say Nakobe Dean has a injury history. Devin Bush, outside of his second season, doesn't. He had 3 interceptions this year, took 2 of them back for a touchdown. One of them was a 97-yard touchdown. He had 8 pass deflections, 125 tackles, 7 tackles for loss for the Browns. He was really good this year. I think he would be a really good fit. My next one is Odafe Owe, who we've mentioned several times at defensive end. Had 7.5 sacks last year. All of that was with the Chargers after moving on from Baltimore. Had 9 tackles for loss. He's going to be 28 this year. Same with Devin Bush, also going to be 28. Owe is a very productive player. He's a guy that if he's your starter and he's out there, you're happy with it. But you can also draft a young guy who ends up taking either his spot or the other spot. And he's not going to be as expensive as a Trey Hendrickson, as a Max Crosby, as those guys. And so I really like that one. The last one was a little tricky for me because, again, I talked about the Tyler Algier. Tight end would be another one on the board. I actually do like the value because he's going to be cheap that Khalil Mack would bring to the room, just because he could bring experience. He could bring a leadership quality, especially because I think they will take a edge either in the first round or the second round. And I really think that having a guy like Khalil Mack to kind of develop him and help him along would be a very valuable tool. And he's still not a bad player and can definitely be a specialist for the team.
So, okay, sure. So I've been marinating on the edge rusher part of it, and I want to start there. And I'm going to be a little greedy here. I am going to say that Trey Hendrickson / Max Crosby needs to be a Buck. I don't think that we can spend this much time on these guys. And knowing the history of the Bucs, being pretty conservative when it comes to this, knowing the need is this bad, and not walk out of there with someone premium. And look, maybe it's not fair. Khalil Mack's going to go down as a much better football player than Hassan Reddick. And so it's not fair to make this comparison. I said it's a false equivalency to compare Hendrickson coming off his injury to Reddick. But I think it's a little more on the nose to say these guys in their mid-30s, what will you actually get? Because that's not the Bucs need. The Bucs don't need someone to complement what they have. They need someone to lead what they already have. And so when I look at the most urgent need, I need someone that I know is going to be better than Yaya Diaby. And that is not a disrespect to him, because he is a really solid number 2. But that's my line of, am I getting someone better than that today? And Khalil Mack yesterday was, and the day before that he really was, and the day before that he was one of the best guys in the league. But tomorrow, is he that? I'm not sure if he's playing such a small amount of downs. I'm not sure when you go through the whole, and I don't mean just to rag on that, Jaron. Joey Bosa would be the same thing.
Sure.
Like he's been so beat up. He's now double-digit years in the league. Is Joey Bosa tomorrow a better player than Yaya Diaby? I'm not sure anymore. He was 3 years ago, not after these injuries and that sort of thing. So that's where I start. And again, I know that takes either money or draft capital or both, but one of those two guys, Max Crosby or Trey Hendrickson, I think the Bucs really need to walk out of there. Now, I think my number 2 would be Nakobe Dean. I think that he, because of the injuries, I don't think he'll be the price of a couple of the other linebackers out there, the Quay Walkers of the world. I think that I think Devin Lloyd also will probably make more than Nakobe Dean on contract. So I think Dean is the guy that you say, okay, he has had an injury history. He also had 128 tackles 2 years ago when he was healthy. And he's been a part of this monster Eagles defense that has been one of the best in the league for years now. So I think Dean as a linebacker, because that's the other thing, whether Levante's playing or not, you can't have Servassier Dennis as your hope at linebacker. Servassier would really need to come in the next year as your number 3 guy there. And then if he ends up playing because of an injury or something and he improves, because he's still a younger player, if he improves, great. And you find that out after the fact, great. But I don't think that's the plan for another year, Servassier Dennis. And then finally, the third thing, I will go with an offensive thing. You did mention him, Jaron, briefly. I am thinking that Tyler Algier has a high probability of happening, and I'm good with that. I think Tyler Algier has been a really good number 2 running back for Atlanta. It's just that Bijan Robinson is unfortunately awesome, and it's kind of hard to get a lot of carries when Bijan. It's like whoever was backing up Saquon is like, someone might be pretty good behind Saquon, but you're not going to see him, and you shouldn't. And I think Tyler Algier, his success rate on 3rd and shorts, on goal line stuff, which the Bucs were constantly playing with because they didn't love some of the situations Bucky was giving them. I think Algier makes a ton of sense. He's got great ball security. I think, quite frankly, there's a few teams in the league that don't have a running back as good as him. I think he could start for a few teams. And so if that's my number 2 and it's someone that's familiar with the Zach Robinson system, I mean, I think we're looking at the possibility that not only we knew Rashad wouldn't be back, it's looking like Sean Tucker 50-50, maybe I would rate it, or closer to that than it was a week or 2 ago. So I think Algier would make a lot of sense, and I think that as an offensive type, because I'll tell you this, James, I'm not too much into the tight end market as I thought I would be. I mean, maybe, I don't know your thoughts on someone like David Njoku or Isaiah Likely, because I thought about those guys, but I think that they might just as easily end up re-signing Otten. I don't know.
Yeah, I think Otten's gone.
Okay.
That's kind of the vibes that we got in Indianapolis, speaking with Jason, speaking with Todd. I do like some of the tight end prospects. David Njoku is one of them that I really like. Another one that I've thrown out there before, just because he'll do all the things that you want a tight end to do, and he's familiar with the system. He's familiar with the offensive coordinator, but Tyler Higbee could be a really, really good fit for this football team. I don't know if I would go the Isaiah Likely route. I think he might want a little bit more production in terms of targets than he was getting in Baltimore, and that's not something that's going to be offered to him in Tampa. The Steelers just released Jonnu Smith, so that's another name that we could keep an eye on here over the coming days. As far as my free agent wish list, and look, I threw some contract values in with mine, and the Bucs are currently sitting with $19 million, a little over $19 million in cap space. We do those restructures that were talked about earlier in the show. You're looking at about $69 million in cap space. So the first one that I put down was Nakobe Dean. Like, we're all on the same page here. I've been talking about Nakobe Dean for quite some time. It's not going to cost you a ton. He's a very good football player. He does everything that you need a linebacker to do in this defense. He can drop in coverage. He's not a great blitzer, but he can get to the quarterback if you ask him to. He's really good in run defense. Going to cost you about $10 million. Another one that I have mentioned for a while, and Ryan, you just talked about him, Tyler Algier. And I was on the Algier train long before Sean Tucker wasn't tendered. Now, that's not to say that the Bucs don't bring back Sean Tucker, but they weren't going to pay him $3.5 million. Maybe they feel they can get him cheaper, or they feel they can replace him cheaper, because you're looking to replace Rashad White. Sean Tucker does not replace Rashad White. That's not the role that he played. Tyler Algier, he can replace Rashad White. And for him, you're looking at about $5 million a year. Like, absolutely, I'm signing up for that. And while Hendrickson would be my preference here, as far as that big swing, to address edge rusher and free agency, the guy that I've really started to lean towards in that next tier of free agency, Crosby's obviously at the top, but he's also not a free agent. Hendrickson is the top tier of free agency. But that next tier, I really like Boye Mafe out of Seattle. This is a guy that has been productive, and he's a very good football player. He's just stuck behind other very good to great football players. And I mean, this is a guy, to be fair, he's never had double-digit sacks. He had 9 back in 2023, but only started 11 games in 2024, only started 4 in 2025. He had a really good postseason, but he's behind even more elite edge rushers. So you can bring him in, for around $15 million a year. And this is a guy that is going to upgrade your pass rush. I do think that he is a little bit better than Yaya Diaby, and he can take on a larger role in Todd Bowles' scheme. So between those 3 players, you're talking about $30 million that you would have to spend. That leaves you with another 39. You can go out and sign Mike Evans for 20, 22 a year. You can go out and you can bring in a corner that can provide some depth and some veteran leadership, because you have to replace Jamel Dean. Sounds like the Bucs are happy with Zion McCollum and Benjamin Morrison as your starting outside corners. You still have to bring somebody in because you're losing Dean and Bill Dorr. So you still have money that you can use to bring in other positions. But those are the 3 that I really like, and I feel are very much rooted in the realm of probability, not just possibility.
Yeah, and that's kind of the route I went too. And it's funny because none of us mentioned this guy, and this is another guy as a little bonus I wouldn't mind them signing, is Bradley Chubb. And we've talked about him before. I would not mind a Bradley Chubb type move because I think he gets after the passer pretty well, but he also is a very good run stopper. And so he would be an upgrade on that side. And I was, obviously Trey Hendrickson would be kind of my top one too. I was kind of going, when I went with my wish list, I went kind of with James's route, which was contract value and kind of things like that. What was the more realistic? And I'm not saying that Hendrickson isn't realistic, because he is. And obviously he wants to be in Tampa, or at least his agent thinks he wants to be in Tampa. So it is a realistic option. And it would be an amazing get as well. It is going to be interesting to see what they do at tight end, as you guys mentioned, because Cade, I kind of thought was going to come back, but then the more and more you hear, as James mentioned, it doesn't sound like he's going to come back. And if that's the case, do you go and take a young rookie, which this draft does have a lot of really good tight ends? We mentioned that on Monday's show. Or do you try to find a guy that is out there? Tyler Higbee, as you mentioned, not only wouldn't cost a ton, but him and Baker did have a pretty good connection when Baker was there for a short time. David Njoku played pretty well with Baker when Baker was there. Now, he's going to be probably a little higher in price. It'll be interesting what market Jonnu Smith gets, because no, he didn't have this great year with the Steelers, but the year before he had like 1,000 yards for the Dolphins. And so do people chalk that up to, not really being as part of the offense in Pittsburgh, or do they chalk it up to him kind of taking a step back? So Isaiah Likely, as you mentioned, while he doesn't have a ton of production, will probably garner a decent market just because his big games have been very big. And so, and he's young, and so we'll see what ends up happening. And hey, he might be the one that ends up in Cleveland if Njoku leaves because of the Monken connection. So it's really interesting to see what happens with that kind of market. But all right, coming up next, we're going to go around the NFL, including a major trade that went down earlier today. Don't go anywhere. All right, Bucs Squad, we're back for our final segment of the Bucs Squad show. Reminder, this is just extra content we do twice a week. Doesn't take anything away from the great work that James does throughout the week, so make sure you follow him all week long. So Trent McDuffie, the all-pro corner for the Chiefs, has been traded for 4 draft picks to the Los Angeles Rams. So first off, you can take the Rams out of the Max Crosby sweepstakes. We brought that up before because they had 2 first-round picks. Maybe they packaged both to get Max Crosby. That's not going to happen now. They sent back one of their first-round picks. The later one, I believe it was number 28. I think it was 29.
Yes.
Sent that to Kansas City. So now Kansas City has 2 first-round draft picks. I know they're hoping Jeremiah Love falls to them, and then they're hoping one of these corners falls to them to replace McDuffie. But it is interesting to see the Rams are basically going all in on next season, which when you have a quarterback that is very good like Matthew Stafford is and is an MVP, but is also aging and also has an injury history, these are the moves that you make. And obviously they made it famous a couple of years ago when they said F those picks, and that's kind of what they went with this year, it seems like.
Yeah, they did such a good job with the Atlanta trade last year. I mean, this is their own pick, but they still have Atlanta's pick because of the trade back last year and Atlanta trading back in, and of course now we know a terrible situation with Jared Verse. So the Rams, or not Jared Verse, excuse me, with Atlanta's pass rusher that they drafted in the first round last year. The name is now escaping me, but James Pierce, thank you. So I think that with the Rams and having a older geared team, like they are still pro Stafford and everything around Stafford, and they feel that they've kind of just put their hands up in the air and said, yeah, when he retires, I don't know. We'll have to go full rebuild. So they have not minded going with high talent guys that are fitting their needs at the time. And the McDuffie trade, I think Mahomes sent out a kind of a frustrated tweet today too, as Kansas City really has had a weird last season or so. I mean, I'm not thinking anything's terminal with them, but it's definitely been a 180 of the last year. Look, I mean, when you identify players, I think we talked about this before. If the Rams have a need, which they did, can you draft someone as good as Trent McDuffie? And again, for their timeline with that first round pick, can they draft someone that can help them right away? Like, is he already going to be what they need him to be in year one? Because Stafford is a year-to-year thing now. I mean, any year could be his last. So if you're thinking about how to maximize your team now, you're not as focused about your current draft picks. Now, again, that will make the rebuild harder because they're not going to have as many players primed for 4, 5, 6 years down the line. But they've said, hey, we've got a window. We're trying to maximize it. Some teams kind of are fickle, and they're like, we know we might suck in a couple years, so we're trying not to make that devastating while also not going all in right now, even though we probably should be, because little do we know we will suck no matter what we do in a couple years. You see this in the NBA all the time. Golden State's done that for a few years now. So I think that really I just appreciate the Rams' aggressiveness, and that it's paid off for them. It paid off for the Super Bowl a few years ago. They survived Aaron Donald retiring because of some of this, because the one year they did draft some guys, and that's why I name slipped Jared Verse earlier, because guys like Jared Verse have worked out. So I appreciate the aggressiveness. That's kind of what you see it work for other teams. You want that to work for yourself. And so you say, hey, that was a trade that you think will work out well. Do the Bucs need to make something like that in the Crosby deal? So again, you just kind of appreciate the team that sees what they want, goes and gets it.
Yeah, I do think this was a crazy amount of compensation for a guy that's on a contract year. Now, of course, the Rams could extend him, and maybe that was part of the talks beforehand, was figuring out if he would re-sign and you can continue to have him. But yeah, I mean, the Rams are in a spot where they need to go all in, because Matthew Stafford, I was honestly shocked that Matthew Stafford was as good as he was last year. I mean, that guy, it seemed like he was being wheeled in and out of the facility on a dolly, Hannibal Lecter style, because his back was so bad. Now all of a sudden he's the MVP. It's absolutely wild. And I'll say this: if the Bucs don't extend Baker Mayfield and Matthew Stafford retires after the season, I would not be shocked if Sean McVay goes hard to get Baker Mayfield back.
Oh, yeah.
For as much as he liked him and as much as they wanted him back. Baker took the opportunity in Tampa because he had a chance to start. He wasn't going to have that in Los Angeles. So that's all of a sudden a team that could go from having to look all over the place for a quarterback because Stafford walks away from the game to still being contenders. So, I'm with you, Ryan. I love how aggressive they are. And I love how I don't want to say I love how they don't value picks. I love how they view picks as ways to acquire elite talent, because that's what you're using the draft for, right? You're trying to find elite players that are going to help you contend for championships. You can trade those off for players that have already proven that they are elite players. Then you're doing what the draft picks are intended to do. You're just doing it in a different way. So, of course, at some point, all these guys are going to have to get paid, and you're going to see guys leaving Los Angeles because they can't pay everybody. But, it was surprising, especially for Kansas City to do this a second time. They traded off L'Jarius Sneed, who was a top corner in the NFL. Now they turn around and they do it again with McDuffie. So, I mean, hopefully for Chiefs fans, there's a plan in place to keep that defense at playing at such a high level. But, hats off to the Rams, man. They keep making moves and they keep making smart ones.
And I'm glad you brought up the point about Baker and the Rams, because if people don't remember, that year that Baker got brought in, that was when Stafford hurt his back again pretty bad. And there was legit talks that he might retire that offseason. And so there was actually conversations being had, like, do we just sign Baker for a longer-term deal and just have to move off of Stafford, and, especially if he retires, but also just move off him. Now, obviously, they decided, no, let's just keep with Stafford, and it's proven to be a great move because he just won the MVP. So it's been great, but that is an option out there as well if Baker does ever hit free agency, because this could be Stafford's last year. You never know. And as you mentioned, James, before the year, they weren't sure he would play this year because his back was so bad. And then all of a sudden he has his best season he's ever had, and he wins the MVP and almost wins another Super Bowl if they could have just got past Seattle. Another interesting thing that happened around the NFL, the Alec Pierce situation in Indianapolis, because everything I read leading up to that was he was going to get franchised because, they couldn't really come up with a contract, but they're going to franchise tag him. Obviously, he had over 1,000 yards this year. Had 6 touchdowns. Last year had 824 yards and 7 touchdowns. He's going to be 26 this upcoming year. So he's still a very young, talented receiver. Led them in receiving, I believe, both years. But ultimately they decided not to franchise tag him. Yeah, led him in receiving back-to-back years. Decided not to franchise him. And so he is a free agent now. So I'm not sure what Indianapolis is going to do there.
As far as what Indianapolis is going to do, I have no idea. Something that I was talking to my best friend about earlier today, do not be surprised in the slightest if the Patriots go out and sign both Mike Evans and Alec Pierce.
Mm-hmm.
Adding both of those receivers to a young up-and-coming quarterback for a team that was just in the Super Bowl, that's going to be a problem. And if Vrabel somehow realizes, I don't know what it's going to take, but if he realizes how good of a running back Travion Henderson is, look out. Like, that offense is immediately elite. Indianapolis kind of has their own set of problems, right? You don't know what Daniel Jones is going to be coming off of the Achilles injury. I sincerely doubt he's ready to go by the start of the season. He might be able to go, but I would honestly be shocked. But, I could see Indianapolis doing kind of what we've talked about for the Bucs in terms of linebacker or edge rusher or, some of these defensive positions of need. They could double dip in the draft. This is a draft where they could walk away with 2 wide receivers plus maybe sign one in free agency as well. There's going to be a couple of guys out there, that aren't going to break the bank, but would be solid contributors for them. So, again, kudos to Alec Pierce. That dude's going to get paid. And it's been really fun to watch his journey from the University of Cincinnati to where he is.
And to your point, Hendrickson's name has been mentioned with Indianapolis as well, to going after him. So
the Colts are in a weird place because it's very possible they're in purgatory. They don't know it yet because of the Daniel Jones situation. Daniel has this big year this past year until he obviously has the huge injury. And I do have to be at least a bit skeptical because it was just 1 year and it turned out to be less than a year because of one of the worst injuries you can have. I have to be a bit skeptical and say that maybe it doesn't work for him the way that they think it will when he comes back. And I think the Alec Pierce part of it is that this is a guy that has been a huge big play guy, but he's kind of unique because he's a 1,000-yard guy off of less than 50 catches. I mean, you're just constantly spamming these huge catches. And my point with that is if I now don't know my quarterback situation, can he actually make all those big plays with a lesser quarterback that's not able to throw these deep balls or be able to set them up in a way? And I just think that if you're talking about, franchise tagging, again, what was the number, James? You said 27 million, something in there for wide receivers. If I don't know what my quarterback situation is, and I'm not even sure how good or not I'm going to be, I mean, I guess the tag would be a nice in between to try to see what the next year would be. But I don't know if it did make a lot of long-term sense for the Colts to be paying to Alec Pierce, to think about the fact that, again, he's not a traditional number 1 receiver from that regard because he's not getting the high volume targets or the high catch rate that you would normally see there. So I think he's a heck of a player, and obviously 1,000 yards is nothing to scoff at. But I just think they're in some limbo, and I'm not sure. I have admittedly not spent a lot of time thinking about the Colts, other than that they were the Bucs of the AFC this year and how the first half went compared to the second. But I don't know their organizational direction. They've been stuck in these 8-9 win seasons for multiple years now, and I mean they missed with the Anthony Richardson part of it. Looked like they struck gold. Getting Daniel Jones, but again, now I don't know what he is long term, so it's kind of hard to know if they should be big spenders or not, because Daniel might come back and he might look more like the guy at the end of the Giants' tenure, or he could come back and not skip a beat. I don't know, but it's just that they have to be a little careful given that situation, what they need to do at quarterback to start the year. And if they do view Daniel as the long-term guy, or if they actually think that the injury might prohibit him from repeating the success he had the first 2/3 of this season.
And as James mentioned, the Patriots are very interesting in all this because of getting rid of Stephon Diggs. They obviously are going to need a wide receiver 1. For a good chunk of the year, Drake May was number 1 in terms of deep ball accuracy and throwing the deep ball. Now he kind of tailored off at the end of the year. Maybe it was the shoulder injury. I don't know, but that's what Alec Pierce would help out. I'm just ready to see and get that breaking news tweet that A.J. Brown's been traded, because none of us think he's staying with Philly, right? Like, we all think he's gone. And the Patriots could be the team that he goes to because of his history.
I would be trading him. And because you don't want an unhappy star. I mean,
Right.
and I think the way the team is built, they've got Devontae Smith. I think they could replace him, even though AJ's really, really good. But this is what happens with wide receivers sometimes. This is the most likely position to have this very thing happen, where they could get targets, they could have team success, and it's still not enough. at the end of the day. So I would be shopping him.
Yeah, diva wide receivers are always going to be a thing. So, I mean, couldn't happen to a better organization if they have to get rid of A.J. Brown and then they can't replace him and they stink because of it.
I will say, I know his stats haven't been great since he got there. I do think Jahan Dotson is a really solid receiver. And so if they did trade A.J. Brown, given the style of offense they play, which is more of a run-based style, having Smith and Dotson wouldn't be the worst duo out there for what they want to do. But, all right, that's going to do it for the Bucs Squad Show. We'll be back Monday. Until next time, fire the cannons.